Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. It is Tuesday, March 26th. I am your host, Tommy Brzee, and we have a great show for you today. We are going to start talking about Oregon State and Washington State. They just got a huge win over the teams that are departing the the Pac-12, that I do want to get into. Then we're going to jump into some news around the news around the April transfer portal, which seems to be a very, very crazy time that is coming just around the corner. Then we're going to talk about McCarthy. There are a lot of people that have a lot of varying opinions about him, and I want to kind of split the middle here tonight and see if I can give my take on the quarterback that has a lot of people talking at the very least. And then at the end of the show, you want to stick around because we have another Top 10 Tuesday. Today we're going to go into quarterback and wide receiver duos that I'm watching going into 2024 that I think are setting the pace for the rest of them. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your questions in front of my eyes and have me answer it or just respond to a comment, whatever it is that you would like to say, you can use the link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to watch the show, have your name on the screen, have a question, and we can have a fun back and forth here. So definitely use gsmcpodcast.net if you have any of those questions. But let's jump right in because we've had some very interesting news come out of the Pac-12. The Pac-12 obviously is down to Oregon State and Washington State, so the Pac-2 if you want to call it that. But they just got another huge win. This is coming about a week or so after they got a huge win in the college football playoff discussions by being able to negotiate a little bit of a bump in their revenue distribution for that contract that everyone signed about 2 weeks ago now. Oregon State and Washington State were able to bump up their total from about $350,000 a year to $3.6 million. So obviously a massive bump there, keeps them in the conversation. But now they have even more money rolling in 2024. It looks like the schools that are heading out of the conference, as we know, we have 4 schools heading to the Big Ten. We have Oregon, Washington, Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA. In the Big 12, we have Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State heading that way. And then all the way out there in the ACC, we have Stanford and Cal heading out there to play their following season. So everyone's gone. All the other 10 teams have found new places to play. It's only them left, and they have been in a battle for quite some time talking about what are the repercussions of this. What is the dollar amount that is going to these two teams, because at the end of the day, the college football playoff does not consider them a quote-unquote conference because you have to have at least 8 teams in your conference to qualify for an automatic bid in the college football playoff. So they technically didn't have a ton of leg to stand on, whereas if you're, the SEC or even the Big 12 a couple of years ago with Texas and OU finding their way out, they had an entire conference. They had, 10 other teams to fall back on and make sure that everything was steady and they could get those teams out and get a little bit of payday back for the teams that are hanging around. So this situation was obviously a little bit different. The vast majority of the teams were leaving. Oregon State and Washington State were kind of fighting a battle against an entire army as 2 soldiers. So they were really up against it, and they were able to get a huge win. It looks like those schools are going to get $65 million combined from the schools that are leaving, and the payments are going to come from now until June, with some $5 million payments, some $1.5 million payments as kind of supplemental pay throughout that time. So this is a huge deal. I think this is something that a lot of us, including myself, I'll be totally honest, a year ago was sitting in, just talking or thinking about college football and kind of the future and seeing everything unfold, especially around the Pac-12. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, the Pac-12 is no longer a thing. Essentially, I genuinely believed that there was very little chance that they were going to survive this craziness that is ahead of us. And as we know, it's nowhere near stopping. The ACC is opening up a whole new can of worms with all of these lawsuits that are coming in front of them and all of these different things that are happening. So the Pac-12 somehow, among all of the craziness that has happened and them being two teams all alone by themselves out there, they were able to kind of find their way out. And obviously there is still so much work to do, which we'll get to here in a second. But as of right now, this is as big of a win as this conference has had in a really long time. And it's really cool to see, just because those two teams were essentially left for dead. None of those 10 teams that have found new places to play were very worried about what happened to Oregon State and Washington State at the end of all this. I don't think they were much worried about how much of a say they were going to have in college football playoff discussions. I don't think they cared how much money was coming in. I think they were more worried about themselves, which I'm not necessarily going to fault them on, but it did leave these two programs in a really, really tough position. And them being able to, at the very least, have a leg to stand on to find their way out of this is absolutely huge news. So there is a huge part of this that isn't usually the case in these scenarios, because there isn't usually this mass exodus. They essentially were having to fight for the ability to control their own conference. So with 10 teams leaving and the Pac-12, the majority of those teams were heading elsewhere, there was still power in those teams' hands to possibly dissolve the Pac-12 or just get rid of it altogether, because, they're 10 teams against 2. But now it seems that that can no longer be the case. Oregon State and Washington State would have to sign off on the Pac-12 dissolving before that could happen. So that's never going to happen, or at least in the near future that's not going to happen, because it looks more and more like these Pac-12 teams are kind of putting their foot in the ground and holding firm on this, that they want to be a conference. They want to be a part of the conversation going forward. We talked about a little bit on Friday with some of the messed up audio that we'll get back to this Friday, but we were talking about the idea of the Pac-12 backfilling with some teams and who those teams could be and when all of that would happen. It seems like they're eyeing this summer to start kind of looking at teams and possibly inviting teams into their conference and start to rebuild this. So the teams that I'm watching, obviously I think Gonzaga is a huge player, because that basketball program has been remarkable for so many years. They're already out west. It makes a ton of sense. Obviously, that doesn't quite affect the football side of things, because Gonzaga does not have a football program, but at the end of the day would help that conference take another step forward in the athletic space. And then you have teams like Boise State, you have UNLV, you have pretty much every ACC team at this very moment, because there's a lot of unknown out there that will start to unfold over the next couple of months. And who knows, maybe there's a Pitt or a Louisville or even a Cal and a Stanford that just left that might be available to come back that way if the things that I tend to think are going to happen around the ACC start to happen, where more teams join lawsuits, more teams start to leave, and this thing kind of snowballs into the ACC being kind of just like a feeder program, essentially, for other conferences for the time being, where a lot of teams are going many different places, whether it's the Big Ten or the SEC, or as we talked about yesterday, the Big 12 is a big player in all of this, not only for the teams on the lower part of the ACC in terms of how big they are, like the Pitts and the Louisvilles, but also for a Florida State or a Clemson. There's no guarantee that either of those teams are shoo-ins to get into either of those conferences. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this kind of plays out. But right now the Pac-12 is really on better footing than I think all of us thought they were going to be some time ago. And it's a huge deal for the future of college football. I think all of us have been talking about this consolidation that is going in the direction of the SEC and the Big Ten. And I don't necessarily think that this stops that train or really slows it all that much. But at the end of the day, if the ACC is going to start to dissolve, if the ACC is going to start to lose Clemson, and then Florida State, and then North Carolina follows, and then some interesting things happening around Miami that maybe I'll get a segment in tomorrow about. But other teams are going to join. And once that happens and teams start to kind of file off from the ACC, they're going to have to backfill with some teams. And then it just becomes an entire frenzy between these two conferences. So it seems like, as of right now, you have the SEC and the Big Ten. They are on as steady a footing as literally anyone in the entire sport. They will be that way for a very long time. There's no two ways about that. But these other two conferences, the Big 12 is on pretty steady footing right now. I don't think they're really worried about necessarily the future. Obviously, they're getting a substantially less of a cut in the college football playoff discussions than the SEC and the Big Ten, but they have a really good position right now where the ACC is starting to kind of crack. You can pull teams from there and then just kind of be that third conference, although that's not where you necessarily want to be. There's not much of a fight to be put up against the SEC and the Big Ten right now. So the Big 12, I think, is in a really good spot to just be in the conversation for a long time because they have enough teams and enough groups to garner the respect in those rooms, which is a huge deal. And then there's two conferences that there's a lot of questions around, and it's the Pac-12 and the ACC. And it seems, as I can see, if you were looking at, the stocks of those two conferences, the ACC is steadily going down and the Pac-12 is steadily rising. And it's been something that's happened rather quickly for the Pac-12. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes before we know about it. So this could be, have been talks for a very long time with the college football playoff and all of these different things that have happened. But I know for a fact these new agreements with the departing schools is a relatively new thing that has been taking a while, but officially became news at least yesterday. But all of this has happened in a pretty short amount of time, and it's happened very shortly after George Kliavkoff was let go, and they brought in Teresa Gould as their AD, the first female AD of a Power 5 conference, which is obviously a massive deal. And she has done an incredible job. She started her job in the beginning of this month, so obviously some of these decisions were, starting to get underway and starting to be decided, but she stepped right in and took it in stride. All of this craziness around the conference that very well could have led to the conference not being a thing in 10 years, but she took it in stride and she handled it very, very well, and obviously has done two major things with the playoff distribution deal and then this deal. It gives the Pac-12 a fighting shot, and at this point, that's really all you can ask for when you're fighting up against the SEC and the Big Ten, where they have no intention on giving away any of the power that they've gained. They have no intention on throwing everyone a lifeline and giving everyone a break from all of the craziness, but at least the Pac-12 now is on the way up, is on the way to being in the conversation. There were many points where they just didn't even have a seat at the table, and now you're getting a seat at the table, and then you build from there. So the Pac-12, obviously, there is still a lot of work to do. You got to find teams that want to come into your conference, teams that will improve your conference from a national perspective, and you have to do it rather quickly because there are a lot of stuff happening. The ACC is going to start purging members, it seems, here pretty soon, but and the Pac-12 might be able to benefit from that, but the Pac-12 is still very much up against it, but the good news keeps rolling in. So as of right now, I'd feel pretty confident. And if you were a Pac-12 fan, I think your conference honestly might be in a better spot than the ACC right now. So very interesting juxtaposition between what we had last year with people questioning if it was going to be a thing in 4 years, and now where they might be on some of the best footing other than, the big boys up top. But it'll be really interesting to see how all of this unfolds, which schools the Pac-12 goes after, and if some ACC schools become available for them to go after in the next couple of months. But we will keep you updated on all of that, of course. But the Pac-12 and Teresa Gould are doing pretty well for themselves right now. But we're going to take our first break right now. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the transfer portal. There has been a lot of chatter around the April transfer portal window and some craziness that is around the corner. So we will break all that down right after this.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about the Pac-12 and a huge win for Oregon State and Washington State over there. But now let's talk some transfer portal. But before we jump into that, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to see your questions on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth, or you can ask something that you were wondering about what I'm talking about in the segment. You can use the link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to watch the show, see your name on the screen, see your question on the screen, so a little bit of fun for all of us. But let's jump into the transfer portal. There has been a lot of talk around the transfer portal as of late. Caden Proctor obviously made huge news last week when he decided he is likely going back to Alabama after transferring to Iowa from Alabama about 2 months ago. So obviously, this has been a big topic of conversation, and there was a very interesting piece, or a very interesting segment on Late Kick with Josh Pate, where he was talking about the Caden Proctor situation and kind of what's in store for the April transfer portal. And I'll be honest, it's not great. I'll put it that way. If you are someone that is worried about the transfer portal, if you see it as this terrifying entity that is super dangerous to the sport of college football, you might want to cover your ears, because this will not subside that belief. I'll be totally honest with you. So this story is very interesting for a number of reasons. There are tons of different directions we could go with it, but let's start with what actually was said by Josh Pate on his story. He was talking to someone that is very much in the know around college football. Josh Pate has tons of sources and people within programs or people around programs that give him very good intel. And if anyone in here or anyone watching this is a part of that type of world and wants to talk to me, please, I'm more than welcome to talk. But Josh Pate was talking to one of these guys, and they were talking about the transfer portal and kind of what is around the corner for the post-spring opening that everyone can go into. And he essentially said that there is a major program in college football that has an entire position group, not necessarily an entire, but a good portion of a position group that coach has a full understanding will not be on the team after spring. They know that they are 1 foot out the door. They know that they're going to jump in the portal essentially on April 15th, right when it opens. So that's already a crazy thing to know. It's crazy that these kids have made up their minds. We're, a couple of weeks into spring practice, but a couple of kids, obviously, at this particular program have already made up their minds and are moving on elsewhere. he also said, which might be the crazier of the two statements, that not only do they know that certain guys are leaving, but they know which guys they are going to backfill with after these guys leave. They know which guys are going to come in as replacements for the ones leaving. And those guys happen to be on other rosters right now. So this obviously opens a full can of worms. And this is absolutely insane. It's truly something that when the transfer portal was introduced, there was all this talk about the, slippery slope we were going down and all of the things that could happen throughout this time that would be dangerous to the sport, that would be dangerous to the kids. And a lot of it I believed. A lot of it I was fully on board with. I totally understood where people were coming from. There were going to be kids that made bad decisions and were unhappy at the place they transferred to, and it's happened already. There were going to be kids that were taken advantage of and promised things that were not going to be followed through on, and that has happened. So all of this stuff I was on board with. This is not necessarily something I ever saw coming. There was never part of me that thought an entire position group can leave a team, and before those guys even sign the papers to enter the transfer portal, they will know who's coming in to replace those players. It's not necessarily something that I thought was going to happen. I thought that the transfer portal would find its level rather quickly, and we would be able to find some rules that actually make sense. But we've gone in the opposite direction. Obviously, the NCAA has not been looking too pretty the last couple of months. They've lost some court cases around NIL that essentially give them no power to do much of anything around their NIL rules because they violate antitrust laws, which is another thing we are definitely watching to see if that is something that they can get an antitrust exemption on or what happens there, but we'll keep you updated as that goes. And also, the transfer portal has kind of just been open up as free reign. Kids can't go in whenever they want, but there are tons of stipulations that give kids a lot of autonomy in this situation. And personally, I'm not necessarily against player empowerment and player power in where they want to go. They should be able to make those decisions for themselves. But it is insane that a kid can be on his way to practice at Tennessee, let's say. This is a totally random team. But let's say he's on his practice to Tennessee. He's about to walk into Neyland Stadium, and he gets a call from someone at another school. I don't want to say any other school because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Totally hypothetical, but he gets a call from a position coach at another school, and he says, hey, we'll offer you X amount if you want to come on over and start for us next year. All of that can happen without really any repercussions, and that money does not have to come to fruition, and that, again, cannot be really policed. It can't be, these people can't be punished is the best way to put it. I apologize, kind of lost my train of thought there for a second, but these people just essentially can do whatever they want. It's the Wild West of college football, where if you see a player you really want, you can go get that player, and you can lie and deceit to do it. And it's obviously a crazy moment. It's something that is going to send shockwaves across the sport over the next month. I think it's going to be something that might turn some fans away from the sport over the next month, because if it is made out to be what Josh Pate was talking about, that's not the end of it. It's not just this one school that has a position group that they're going to replace. It's going to be all over the country. And the teams that you think are going to benefit, the big dogs, they're going to benefit. The teams that you think are kind of the smaller dogs and are going to get taken advantage of, they'll get taken advantage of. This will go down exactly the way that you were expecting it to go down, and it'll really hurt the sport. At least in the short term, it'll really hurt the sport. I'll get to the long term here in a second, but the sport, since its inception, has been skewed. That's just kind of the way football works. There are certain guys in certain parts of the country that are more talented. There are certain financial abilities for schools that have put them at better footing than others. I think that has been a thing really since the inception of college football. It's just changed where the money has been throughout the years, but it's been skewed. But this changes that entire equation. It's no longer skewed towards the big time teams. It might be a little bit rigged towards the big time teams. And that's not necessarily to say there's a big conspiracy to make it rigged towards the big time teams, but the way the NCAA set up the transfer portal, the way they set up NIL was essentially, we're going to throw out these ideas, we're going to throw out these concepts, and have very little guidelines around them. And it's not that they didn't try. They obviously put together some type of rules, although that was a couple of months into the transfer portal in the NIL world. But they tried to put in some rules, and the rules fell flat. And it's because all of this has been happening for the last decade. All of the NIL stuff has been happening way longer than a decade, to be totally honest. I mean, it's been going on since at least Reggie Bush, but well before that. So people have been pushing for players to get paid. People have been pushing for player empowerment for a really long time. And the NCAA knew this, and the NCAA essentially sat there and just waited for the volcano to burst. They waited for the moment that they had to make action, which was other states coming in and making their own NIL rules. They then decided to jump into the fray. If they had jumped into the fray in 2015 or 2014 when the playoff was first introduced, I don't want to say that we wouldn't have any problems, because this sport definitely would have issues at its hand, but man, would we have a better grasp on just what's going on in our sport. I think there are tons of people that don't even know that there's a transfer portal window after spring and don't even know how crazy it might be. Josh Pate was saying it could be crazier than the December window, which is something that really should never happen, right? Players should go to a team, they should transfer to a team and go through spring workouts and not either immediately want to change paths or have some big-time players, whether they're starting at their current place or could start somewhere else, jumping in April and only joining for the summer workout. So the fact that we are around the corner from a transfer portal window that could be the craziest that we've ever seen is something that I wasn't necessarily expecting this year. I wasn't necessarily expecting ever, especially in the April opening, because December felt like the time, right? December felt like the opening for all of these kids to make their decision, to find a new place to play, go through a full off season, and then be ready to roll in spring. Now it seems like kids are kind of open to whatever. They are very amenable to the circumstances that are around them, and these decisions can be made fairly quickly. So essentially all of that to say, prepare yourself for April that a lot of us will not love, that a lot of us will be looking around college football and trying to find where college football went, where the parts of college football that we love so much, where all of those went, and when or if they will ever come back. I think that's something that is definitely possible and is definitely going to be very real over the next month. You will see a lot of people wanting to abandon the sport. You will see a lot of people angry and calling out the NCAA or calling out other teams for tampering, and there's not much really we can do, at least for right now. As April unfolds, it's going to be upsetting, it's going to be weird, and we're kind of just have to wait it out. We're going to kind of just have to hunker down, let the storm pass, as it were, and hopefully, and I tend to think that this is already happening behind the scenes as coaches hear more and more about what's going to happen, but hopefully people start to step up. As we know, in pretty much anything, whether it's sports or society or whatever you want to talk about, something big needs to happen before genuine change comes, right? There needs to be an event that everyone can look at and say, that is bad for the sport. That is bad for the future of college football. That is bad for the kids. That is bad for essentially everyone involved. And it could very well be this April transfer portal where you see names you never even dreamed would be in the transfer portal jump in and find a new place to play. And I don't know the names. Caden Proctor will obviously be one of those names. There's been a couple other guys that have made their intentions known, but there are more coming. There are more that are hiding under the surface, and it's going to be some names that'll make your jaw drop. But after all of that, after the dust settles with all of this craziness and we get to a place where everyone can take a deep breath, hopefully the group that is, I'm going to call them the Nick Saban group, the group that are hopefully going to be kind of the future of college football and usher us into this new era of college football as smoothly as possible. I think it has to be former coaches. It has to be former players. It has to be people that not only are around the sport and understand the sport, but genuinely love the sport. I've talked about this what feels like a million times, but I'll do it 1,000,001. The people currently making decisions for the sport don't love the sport. It's really that simple. I wish it wasn't the case, but that's kind of just how it goes. That needs to change as quickly as possible, and I think this April could be that moment where it's not only Nick Saban in the picture, it is big coaches from all over the country, whether it's Bill Snyder hanging out and giving his sage wisdom, or any big-time coaches from the past that step up to the plate and show what they know about this sport, and essentially give us an idea of not only where we are and how really broken this entire system is, but what is some ways to get out of it, and what's some ways to get out of it where you don't take the power back out of the players' hands, because there is a way forward where players can have that autonomy, have that power over the transfer portal, over NIL, and does not have a system that's entirely broken and they can just get contacted whenever they want and it's all over the place. We don't need to have that, but we need the right people steering the ship for that to happen. So Nick Saban has started this trend, I'll call it. More people need to join in, and they need to join in a very, very real way. We saw Nick Saban on Capitol Hill talking about this. I've been on record as saying I don't think necessarily that Congress is going to be the ones to come to the aid of college football, just because this is not necessarily the most pressing issue on their hands right now. But I do think there needs to be an entity that steps up. There needs to be a governing body that steps up, and whether it's developed by Nick Saban or developed by Greg Sankey or whoever it is, it needs to be someone that knows the sport, that loves the sport, that cares about the future of the sport and the players. Because as of right now, we think we're giving players power. We think we're giving them the ability to do what they want, and we are, but at the same time, we are putting them in just so much danger of getting taken advantage of losing part of what they loved about this sport. It's an even more slippery slope that we're going down, where kids no longer even think about the school. They no longer even think about academics, and that's already something that started to happen, but they don't even think about the environment or the people or the energy they feel when they're on that campus, which when I was going to college was a huge part of it. Going onto a campus and kind of just feeling how I felt. Did it feel like home when I was there? Was a huge part of it, and that's going to get lost in all of this. And I'm not saying that, kids aren't welcome to make the decision however they see fit, but kids are going to make the wrong decision. That's just the way it is, and you never want to see that happen, because then you see a college football career come to an end way quicker than it needs to. So obviously, this is a very, very interesting time in the sport, and this next month is going to be absolutely wild. I will keep you updated with all of the players and the teams that are getting hit by this, but at the end of the day, my advice is essentially just strap in, wait it out. It's going to be very weird, but I think it's going to bring about needed change and eventually will lead to a healthier, better form of college football that actually, cares about you, gives players power, but doesn't set them up to fail. So it'll be really interesting to see all of this unfold. Obviously, I will keep you updated as more stuff happens here, but settle in, I guess, is the best way to end this segment. But we're going to take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about J.J. McCarthy. There is some, I don't want to say confusion, but there are some people with some varying opinions about J.J. McCarthy, and I'm going to kind of split the middle, tell you what I think about him, and kind of give you an idea of where some people are right about him, where some of the haters are not so right about him. But stick with us, and we will be right back with that.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the craziness that is around the corner in the April transfer portal window. It looks like that might be the craziest one we've seen yet, but we will wait to see what happens there. Let's talk about J.J. McCarthy. He has been a huge topic of conversation over the last couple of weeks, especially over the last couple of days. He had the Michigan Pro Day, I believe yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, and had a great day. Absolutely ripped the ball around, made some remarkable throws. Actually, I think it was on Sunday. But made some remarkable throws, made a throw that is absolutely eye-popping, and I think everyone knows what I'm talking about because it made its rounds on Twitter, and people were comparing it to Zach Wilson's famous throw in his pro day that caught a lot of people's eyes. And first of all, they're not the same throw, but that's totally beside the point. It does bring up an interesting point about J.J. McCarthy. Everyone has an opinion. Some of those opinions are entirely biased against Michigan because they are Ohio State fans or Penn State fans or Michigan State fans, whatever, or really any fan. No one really likes Michigan, but some people think he's incredible. Some people don't love his style of play. Some people think his style of play is the exact way that he was meant to play throughout his college career. And I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that the way this works a lot of the time is there are two extremes to a player evaluation, and the truth about that player is probably somewhere in the middle of those two. So the extreme good is some people saying he's the best player, the best quarterback in the draft. Mainly Jim Harbaugh, his former coach, makes sense why he thinks that. But there are still some people out there that have him very, very high. I know our buddy that we had on here last week, Andrew Tate, has him as the number 2 guy in the class. So there's a lot of variation about what people think about him. The extreme bad being he was carried by his defense, the run game, and he can't carry an NFL team. And some people just think like the meditation stuff is corny. Some people just think he has some corny about him, and that's why they don't like him. But that's totally beside the point. That has nothing to do with football. But there are a couple of things that I am absolutely sure of with J.J. McCarthy, and it's not necessarily I don't think these are hot takes. I don't think these are anything that really anyone can debate. But J.J. McCarthy has been really, really talented for a very long time. He was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. He went to IMG Academy down in Bradenton after, I believe, transferring from somewhere in Indiana or Illinois. I cannot exactly remember. But finished his career at IMG. He went to Michigan and immediately made waves. During his freshman year, he didn't play a lot. They had Cade McNamara as their starting quarterback in the 2021 season, but did come in here and there and showed some real good sparks. Obviously, some sparks that they liked around Michigan, because the following year he beat out Cade McNamara for the starting role, became the quarterback, took Michigan to the playoff. He beat out Cade McNamara, who took Michigan to the playoff for the first time under Jim Harbaugh, and began his starting career in 2021. He then started to execute the offense to near perfection. Now, we'll talk later about the difficulty of executing that offense, but he was money. He did everything on time. He was incredible in a number of different ways, and his level of execution was very close to the top of college football for the last 2 years. He had one loss throughout his starting career at Michigan, and it was a game where his defense gave up 51 points. Now, his defense didn't give up all those points because J.J. McCarthy was not perfect in that game. He did have a pick or two, I think, definitely had a pick six, and definitely wasn't perfect, but 46 points should get you a win, logically, especially if you turn over the ball a couple of times and you still get 46 points. It should probably get you the win, but that's besides the point. He lost a game to a TCU team that they probably shouldn't have lost to, but I don't put necessarily the majority of the blame on his shoulders by any means. So let's start there, just with those simple facts. He at least has a very good set of skills to pick from, to work from, and a confidence level that is above most people in this draft class, and a winning mentality that is probably above most people in this draft class, because the dude lost one game. So he is not really used to losing. He knows what it takes to win football games, and that's what I know. Now, some of the hits on him are totally fair. Some of them I fully get. There are worries that can he go out and straight up win games for his team? I think during his time at Michigan, he never really had to. There were games where he obviously had to play better and was more efficient in those games, but for the majority, the defense played really well. The running game played really well. Can he be the guy that goes out there and straight up wins a game for a team? Is still a question. He didn't necessarily get to show his arm talent a ton at Michigan, which makes people question his arm talent. It's there. I really have no other way of putting it. He can sling the ball all over the field. He has arm strength, especially for his size. It's pretty remarkable how far he can sling the ball. And I think if that's your biggest worry about him, I wouldn't worry about his arm talent, because I think there's plenty of that. The one worry that is actually my biggest worry, and I totally get if you were to make this argument, is his size. He is a little bit on the shorter side. He is a little bit on the skinnier side as a quarterback. Obviously has great athleticism and can escape the pocket, but we saw with Bryce Young a year ago where, a smaller guy in stature and in height, and it created problems for him. Now, J.J. McCarthy is obviously taller than Bryce Young and definitely a little bit more well-built, but still is probably below average when you come to normal quarterbacks. So I think that would be the biggest knock on him, if you have a big knock on him as of right now. We talked about the arm talent. The arm talent is absolutely real. I'm not necessarily worried about that. The athleticism is real. That's another thing. I'm not worried about that. The big question becomes is how readily can he use those at the next level? How well can we set him up to be successful? Because he is one of those quarterbacks in this class that I would say can be very successful in this league if put in the right situation. And that's the case for a lot of these quarterbacks, but obviously with Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, even Drake May, according to some people, they might not need as great of a situation as someone like J.J. McCarthy, who I think needs to be fit into a very good spot. So it's very interesting talking about this kid, because I really do think he could hit huge on the next level. I think he is someone that can throw into tight windows. He can throw the ball a country mile. He has athletic ability that will make him more than formidable for defenses and D linemen that he's facing. He is smart, and he absolutely loves football. He is a very hardworking kid that wants to be the best, and I think that's very clear by the way that he approaches every game. Obviously, the meditation has rubbed some people the wrong way, but at the end of the day, whatever gets you ready to play your best football, more than fine with me. So my whole take on J.J. McCarthy this entire draft process, I've been trying to wrap my head around him, and I have landed at the official take of, I don't know. I have no idea. This kid is an absolute anomaly. The physical ability is clear to me. I have very little doubts about his arm talent, about his ability to extend plays, to make the throws that he needs to make. I have no questions about the mentality. I think he loves football. I think he wants to be the best. I think he has that little bit of craziness that you need to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I do wonder what he looks like in a non-Michigan uniform. Obviously, that's the big question. How does he adapt to a new offense? How quickly can he learn it? And the thing about him is he's under a microscope the second that he walks onto a team and the second that he starts for a team, because there are people that are going to be, as they say, preying on his downfall. And he is going to be trying to not give that to him, but every mistake that he makes, it will be all over Twitter. It will be a big reason why there will still be people, whether he is a 10-year vet in his career, there will still be people that say he's not good because of this video and this video and this video. But the reality for J.J. McCarthy and the way that he ends up succeeding is being who he is, being as consistent as you can possibly be, executing an offense, getting the ball to the playmakers. And if people want to call you a game manager, if people want to say that you're not to the level of all the other guys in the league, who cares? If you're winning football games and that's all that J.J. McCarthy cares about, he could care less what everyone else is saying about him. So there are some very interesting opportunities for him, some teams that have kind of come above the pack in terms of teams to watch to draft J.J. McCarthy. I did see a report yesterday that there were some rumors around the Commanders taking him number 2 overall. I don't necessarily expect that to happen, but I guess that's something we could watch. That would not be the situation that I personally would like the best for him. I think one of the teams that I see over and over and over is Minnesota. They keep being in the market for a quarterback. Obviously, Kirk Cousins signing with the Falcons. You now have an opening at that spot, and I've seen them trade up to the 4 spot, the 5 spot to get J.J. McCarthy, and I think that would be a fantastic fit. I think Kevin O'Connell would run an offense that would totally adhere to his strengths. Obviously, having Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison on that team does not hurt one bit, so I think that would be a great fit. Denver is another team. I think Sean Payton would be a great fit. J.J. McCarthy is someone that does have more athleticism than Drew Brees, I'll give you that, but if you can unlock that accuracy that he has and that bit of arm talent that he has, Sean Payton and him could work very well and really kind of start to build a new era in Denver. And then the Chargers are kind of the wild card here, where there have been some people talking about possibly Jim Harbaugh drafting him at 5 and trading away Justin Herbert. They're not going to do that. That would be utterly insane. But if they do, we know how he works with Jim Harbaugh. So I think there's 3 really good scenarios for him. Now, all of that is very much up in the air. There are tons of things that can change. We don't know if him and Sean Payton are going to mold the way that, people might expect them to. We don't know that him and Kevin O'Connell are going to meld the way that people want him to. But at the end of the day, he's going to be a massive unknown until he steps onto the field. I don't expect him to burst onto the scene and win Rookie of the Year and light the world on fire. But if you were to tell me in 10 years I'll be watching J.J. McCarthy as the starter for the Minnesota Vikings, and he's been there in his entire career, and the fan base loves him, and he's been to some playoffs and even made some noise, I wouldn't think you're crazy. The dude has every tool or every box that you want checked off for a quarterback that you're going to draft. He pretty much has checked off. There's not a lot of things where there's glaring needs for something. There are question marks, don't get me wrong, but there's not like this massive red flag for JJ McCarthy. So whoever takes him, I think they're going to be more than confident in his abilities, obviously, but it's going to be really interesting to see how all this plays out, because JJ McCarthy, in my personal opinion, is the most interesting person in the entire draft. Not because he's the best player or even the best quarterback, but just because I have no idea what the next level looks like for him. I think he could be a 10-year starter and be on the level of the likes of like Matt Ryan and that group of guys, but I also think he could be a dud. That's definitely in the cards. So JJ McCarthy is a very interesting guy. I fall somewhere in the middle of the two extreme groups that have formed around him, but I still have no earthly idea of what the next chapter of JJ McCarthy's career looks like, but I really do think it could be very bright. But we'll see. I'll keep you updated on how everything happens with him, what team he gets drafted to, and how I like that fit, and we'll definitely be watching him closely, that's for sure. But we're going to take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to do another Top 10 Tuesday. We're going to talk about some top quarterback and wide receiver duos going into 2024. This is a really tough list to make because first of all, you have to find out which wide receiver you want to use for some of these teams, but then you have to weigh the quarterback against wide receiver. It was tough, I'll put it that way, but we will be back with that right after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about JJ McCarthy and some of the varying opinions about him going into this draft cycle, but now let's do a Top 10 Tuesday. Let's talk about quarterback and wide receiver duos going into 2024. There are a ton to choose from. There are a million guys across the country that I'm very interested in, and I cannot wait to watch this upcoming year. And it was really hard to make this list, but I got my 10 and I'm going to stick to it. I know there will be people in the comments here that are none too happy, but I think I have a solid list here. So let's start up top with Noah Fifita and Tatoria McMillan. This is a very interesting number one decision. I'll be totally honest with you. Obviously, Noah Fifita is not the best quarterback in the nation. Tatoria McMillan, in my opinion, might be one of the best wide receivers in the country, but some have Luther Burden over him or Travis Hunter or whoever you want. But the reason I picked these two is really mainly because they're in total lockstep. They fully understand each other. They know how, McMillan knows how Fifita throws the ball. Fifita knows when McMillan's going to come out of his break and how he comes out of his break. They are on absolute lockstep, and I think it's something that could really give Tatoria McMillan a very good chance to win the Biletnikoff in 2024. Definitely someone that I think is a mainstay in that conversation and will really shoot up the NFL draft boards as the season goes on, in my opinion. The rest of these guys are a little bit tougher to order, and I think a lot of that has to do with some transfer additions. A lot of that has to do with some new players having to step into big roles. And one of the transfer teams that I've set up here is Dillon Gabriel and Evan Stewart. I think Gabriel is the ultimate facilitator. He might be one of the best, if not the best facilitator in the entire country. The dude just puts the ball where it needs to be like 80% of the time. It's absolutely insane. I think with Evan Stewart, he fits his mold very, very well. I was in between him or Tez Johnson for this role, and I think either of them could be the top guy for Oregon, but I think Evan Stewart fits Dillon Gabriel a little bit better and will have a little bit more success. It's going to be incredible to watch Will Stein work with these two guys along with Tez Johnson, because this might be a more talented, more dangerous group than they had a year ago, and that offense was really good a year ago. So very excited to see what they can do there. At the number 3 position, I have Quinn Ewers and Jonte Cook, and I've seen a couple of these rankings have Quinn Ewers and Isaiah Bond in this role, and I feel very good about Jonte Cook. I think he is someone that has been in the program at least a year, was under Xavier Worthy last year and got, runs here and there, but not a lot of playing time. Steve Sarkisian is not necessarily known for rotating wide receivers very often, so Cook mainly was learning under Xavier Worthy a year ago, and I think he's ready to roll. I think he's ready to be the guy for this team and be the number 1 receiver, and I think him and Quinn Ewers are in absolute lockstep. Obviously, him and Isaiah Bond, it seems like him and Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden are kind of finding that rhythm very, very quickly, but at the end of the day, I think Jonte Cook might be the most dangerous wide receiver on the entire staff. I think he's someone that is going to, it might not be the guy you're worried most about coming into the game, but he will be the guy you're talking about at halftime and making adjustments to guard him. So it'll be really interesting to see all of this unfold. Isaiah Bond obviously is a candidate for that role. Matthew Golden, another one. DeAndre Moore has been making tons of waves in their early spring practices, so any number of those guys could be the number 1 receiver, but I'd lead Jonte Cook in that group of remarkable wide receivers that they have over there at Texas. And then number 4, I have Brady Cook and Luther Burden. And this is a lot like the Fafita-McMillan duo because they're an absolute lockstep. I think Luther Burden is the most talented and the best wide receiver in the entire country. I think he is an absolute game changer. Brady Cook is just a consummate professional. He's going to put the ball on time, on target, and when you do that with Luther Burden, good things happen because it's a matter of just getting the ball into this kid's hands, and he makes just ridiculous plays. So he's someone I'm very excited to watch, and I think that this duo, if they can put it together the way they did a year ago, the SEC might be on watch for the Missouri Tigers. And then at 5, I have Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, and these are two that could be much higher on the list because the talent level of these two are just off the charts. Both these guys are absolutely insane. Obviously, they have a good relationship. Last year, Travis Hunter was a huge part of their offense. But I do think that Colorado has made some adjustments to their team, and one of the big-time adjustments they made is bringing in LeJontay Wester, a FAU transfer, into town. He is an absolute dude. I think he's a wide receiver that I honestly almost replaced Travis Hunter with him because I think he could be the leading receiver for Colorado this upcoming year. But at the end of the day, I do think Travis Hunter is going to be a huge piece of this team, and the confidence between the two has to be a huge plus. But I do think Travis Hunter will play a little bit less offense this upcoming year because of the introduction of LeJontay Wester, and we'll see how that kind of develops. So that's why I have them at 5 and not up at like 2 or 3 where they definitely could be. And then I go to UGA and Carson Beck and Dominic Lovett. And again, this is one that you had some names to choose from. You could have gone Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas, London Humphreys. You could have gone Dylan Bell if you really wanted to. But I ended up going Dominic Lovett. And I think last year when you had Lovett come over to UGA, and there were a lot of people looking at that as a huge addition, and it really was. But there was also Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers on that roster, and there's only so many targets to go around. So Lovett was a little bit hidden last year, made some really good plays, but wasn't necessarily the feature piece. I think he is now ready to jump into that role and be a big part of this offense. I think having London Humphreys come in opens up even more roles for Dominic Lovett. So this is a very interesting team that is going to spread around the rock to tight ends and wide receivers, but I think if there was a guy that I'm leaning towards being the go-to guy for Carson Beck, I think it would be Dominic Lovett. So I have them at the 6th position. And then I have Jackson Dart and Trey Harris, the Ole Miss duo. They are just remarkable, and they are an absolute lockstep like a couple of the guys above them. And they are also in lockstep with Lane Kiffin, which is a huge part of this. Lane Kiffin has been an absolute mastermind of getting Trey Harris open, and even when you can't get him open, he's pretty much open. He's open 90% of the time unless there are multiple guys on him, so he's someone that I absolutely love. I think could have an absolute breakout season, is definitely one of the top 5 to 7 wide receivers in the entire country, and then Jackson Dart slowly coming into his own more and more. I'm very excited to see what he can do. Then at 8, we got Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo, two guys at Miami right now. Cam Ward transferred over from Washington State. Xavier Restrepo has been there for a minute, and he is a remarkable receiver, probably one of the most underrated receivers, He can make all types of plays and is an absolute game changer with Jacoby George next to him. He takes up a lot of attention, so Xavier Restrepo fills in the gaps. And I think Cam Ward is going to have to find him early and often. I think he's going to be the third down guy pretty consistently throughout the season. So very excited to see what those two can do, because Xavier Restrepo is making crazy plays with not quite as high of quarterback play as Cam Ward will likely bring to Miami. And then at the 9 position, I have Will Howard and Emeka Egbuka. Emeka Egbuka is very interesting this upcoming year because he's officially the guy in Columbus. He sat behind some remarkable receivers, most recently Marvin Harrison Jr., and now it's his time to fully take the reins and be the number 1 receiver, and that is a thing that people handle differently, obviously. So it'll be really interesting to see how he handles that. Can he jump into that position and be totally confident, or do they have to look elsewhere like Carnell Tate or Brandon Ennis for that number 1 role? But I think Egbuka will be more than fine, and I expect him to be the guy. And then Will Howard, I think, is just going to put the ball on target. That is really all you have to do with this wide receiver group that you're going to have at Ohio State. Just put the ball on target the way that Kyle McCord did not do a year ago, and you'll be okay. You will have a formidable offense. You will do incredible things. So I feel good about Will Howard's ability to do that. I think he's going to be incredible. And then the number 10, a little bit of a wild card. I'll be totally honest. There were definitely some names that I thought of to go in this 10 role, but I really like Cam Rising and Dorian Singer. I think this is a duo that is new, obviously, with Dorian Singer coming over from USC, Cam Rising coming off an injury. There's a lot of worry around Utah, but if Cam Rising is healthy, I know him to be a Pac-12 champion quarterback. I know him to be a guy that executes an offense at a remarkably high level and is remarkably on target game in, game out. And Dorian Singer with the ball in his hands is dangerous. So putting those two things together, as long as Cam Rising is healthy, I think this is one of the best duos in the country. I think they are someone that maybe people aren't talking about right now, but as the Big 12 season unfolds and Utah starts to become one of the big-time players there, they'll be talking about it more and more, because Dorian Singer is a remarkable wide receiver, and as long as the ball is in his hands, he'll be more than fine. And then some honorable mentions that just were off the list: Jackson Arnold and Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson is remarkably talented as well, someone that I really like at the wide receiver position. Jackson Arnold just worries me a little bit going into his first year, starting fully, going into the SEC. A lot of things around him, the O-line not being quite as solid as you would have liked, but this is a very formidable duo, and if the O-line can put it together, watch out for them, because OU could put together a season that no one, I mean, the Vegas over-under line I think is 7.5, so really no one is expecting from them other than Sooner fans. But then we have Jalen Milroe and Jalen Hale. I do think Jalen Hale will end up being the number 1 guy over there. There are tons of guys that will be going after that spot. Kendrick Law is one of them. Ryan Williams coming in as a freshman could even be a wide receiver 1, but I really like Jalen Hale. I think he fits Jalen Milroe's play style really well, and I think he could be the guy that jumps up into that number 1 role for Bama, but there's a lot of question marks at that wide receiver position right now for Bama, so we'll see how that unfolds. And then Haynes King and Eric Singleton Jr., two guys that made huge waves in the ACC a year ago. We had Haynes King was the leading passing touchdown leader in the ACC, and Eric Singleton was an All-American freshman last year at receiver. So I think both these guys are in lockstep. I think they fit each other really well. Eric Singleton is the ultimate quarterback for the offense that Buster Faulkner is running. So very excited to see what they can do and build off what they had a year ago. And then Grayson McCall and Kevin Concepcion. Oh, did my best. But Grayson McCall is going to be a very good quarterback. He puts the ball on target, and Kevin Concepcion has really burst onto the scene late last season and is going to be a big-time target for NC State. And if they can put it together, then NC State is one of the more interesting teams in the entire country. But that will do it for the Top 10 Tuesday. Obviously, that was a very tough list to put together. You have to weigh a lot of different things. But I think I put together a pretty good 10. I think that number 10 spot is going to be a little contentious, but at the end of the day, I feel good about Cam Rising and Dorian Singer going into this season. But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Tommy Brzee again. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference for us. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the socials for all of the updates and content. It is obviously March Madness season, so my guy Nelson over on the basketball podcast has you fully covered there. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.